She stormed onto my property like she owned it, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on, and the signature HOA arrogance dripping from every word. "You don't belong here," she barked, pointing to my own front porch. 30 minutes later, a squad car rolled up, and then everything changed. Because the officers stepping out didn't just know me, they saluted me. What Karen didn't realize was this: I'm the one who trained every single cop she called for backup. And now, she was about to learn the hard way what happens when you mess with the wrong man on his own land. The sun cast a steady light over the ranch as she marched forward, dressed in the typical authority on a power trip uniform, pressed slacks, oversized sunglasses, and a freshly printed clipboard filled with papers she never fully read. The gate said everything: entitlement, impatience, and the absolute certainty that her word was law. With a huff, she stopped at the edge of the front fence, tapping her foot like she was waiting for a tardy student. Her voice rang out, loud enough to catch the ears of every neighbor within shouting distance. "You're not supposed to be here," she snapped, pointing one perfectly manicured finger toward the house. "This property is under HOA supervision, and you are in violation." The words came with the kind of confidence only someone profoundly misinformed could wield. No invitation, no greeting, just a demand to explain presence on land that had been owned and managed outside of HOA jurisdiction since before the HOA even existed. Yet the woman acted as if property lines, title deeds, and legal distinctions all bowed to her clipboard. She waved the stack of papers in the air like a badge. "This document states all residences on this street fall under our guidelines. You're not above the rules, sir." Her emphasis on "sir" carried no respect, only a forced civility, like someone addressing a problem they couldn't wait to be rid of. She squinted, clearly hoping the show of paper pushing would intimidate, confuse, or at least frustrate. But the silence that followed made her nervous. She took it as defiance, not understanding that the lack of reaction was something else entirely. Few seconds passed before she continued, undeterred. "Your fence is non-compliant. Your barn structure is outside the approved color range. And we have reports that your outdoor lighting exceeds our lumens cap for nighttime brightness." No explanation for where those reports came from. No evidence. Just accusations spoken with certainty, and the smirk of someone convinced backup was only a phone call away. She glanced toward her clipboard again, pretending to consult it, though her eyes didn't move over any text. "I'm giving you a verbal notice to vacate until you bring the property into full compliance. You have 30 minutes to leave, or I'll be forced to contact law enforcement." The confidence was staggering. No legal right, no authorization, no jurisdiction, but an order nonetheless. She looked around, likely hoping others were watching. A performance wasn't complete without an audience. She even straightened her back, holding her chin high as if she were conducting official HOA enforcement protocol. The house behind her had belonged to a family for generations, and its boundaries had been upheld in every county record, every zoning permit, and every land survey ever conducted. But the woman with the clipboard saw only an opportunity to flex her paper-thin power. Her expression dared anyone to challenge her. Another glance toward the clipboard, and then she added, "You should know that refusal to comply may result in fines, citations, or escalated action. We can involve the city if necessary. You're already in breach." The tone shifted briefly from aggressive to falsely sweet. "Of course, I'd rather not involve the police. We're a community, after all." The smile was hollow, more threat than courtesy. "But if you don't vacate, I'll have no choice." She pulled her phone from her pocket as if to show just how ready she was to make that call. Her thumb hovered over the screen while she looked up expectantly, waiting for some sign of fear or retreat. None came. With an annoyed sigh, she tapped the screen and muttered, "Fine, you've made your choice." While dialing, she looked around again, as if already envisioning herself being thanked by the responding officers, perhaps even praised by neighbors for enforcing the rules. She stepped aside to speak more clearly into her phone, describing the supposed violation with exaggerated urgency. "Yes, I'm reporting a trespasser on HOA-regulated land. Yes, I need an officer to come immediately. He's refusing to comply with removal orders." The satisfaction in her voice was unmistakable. She ended the call and crossed her arms, looking smug, victorious, and completely unaware of the storm she'd just summoned. Her clipboard rested against her hip like a deputy's badge, her sunglasses hiding the glee in her eyes. 30 minutes. That's what she gave. Enough time to feel like she had power. Enough time to imagine herself triumphant. But not nearly enough time to realize that the person she was trying to evict wasn't just another homeowner. No one else spoke. The wind moved quietly over the property, the same land that had never needed an HOA to maintain its order. The clock she'd set ticked down, not toward compliance, but toward confrontation, toward a reckoning she hadn't anticipated. And the only thing more dangerous than an uninformed authority figure is one who doesn't know who they're dealing with. The clipboard shifted from one hand to the other as she glanced at her watch with deliberate exaggeration. Her lips curled into a tight, satisfied smile, the kind that often follows the illusion of victory. "You have 30 minutes, she announced, her tone sharp, final, and theatrical. "If you're not off the property by then, the police will handle it." The declaration hung in the air like a challenge, her voice projected with the authority of someone who believed the law was hers to command, her words sharp and full of premature triumph. The phrase "handle it" carried weight, designed to intimidate, to provoke hesitation, to make it seem like she had summoned a force beyond argument. She tapped the clipboard with a pen, as if to emphasize her control over time itself. Her heels shifted slightly on the gravel, and she adjusted her sunglasses with the precision of a self-proclaimed enforcer. The ranch, with its well-maintained fencing and years of history etched into every inch of land, meant nothing to her. All she saw was defiance, and all she wanted was submission. The phone she had just used to call the police rested in her palm, screen still glowing faintly. She glanced at it again, as though expecting a confirmation text from the universe itself. Her head turned slightly, scanning for witnesses, neighbors, delivery drivers, passers-by. Authority loved an audience, and she was no exception. She thrived on the possibility that someone might see her in action, enforcing the rules she believed applied universally, regardless of legality or common sense. Her voice rose again, sharpened now by the ticking clock. "Non-compliance will result in escalating consequences. You are in violation of property codes, community guidelines, and environmental ordinances." Each phrase was delivered with practiced drama, pulled from an imaginary handbook only she had read. The accusations were vague and unspecific, yet stacked with enough official-sounding words to confuse the average homeowner. She glanced down at the clipboard again, flipping through pages with the speed of someone trying to look busier. Then they were. Her fingers paused at random lines, lips silently moving as though reading a sacred text. In reality, the paperwork was nothing more than printed templates, unsanctioned notices, outdated citations, and one handwritten list of complaints from unnamed neighbors. The silence from the other side of her performance only intensified her need to dominate the moment. "You may think this is your land," she continued, her tone mocking now, "but the HOA charter is legally binding. We have enforcement rights. You're not exempt." The confidence grew with every word, fed by the ticking of her imaginary deadline. The 30-minute ultimatum wasn't just a threat. It was her belief in the system she thought she controlled. She paced slightly, making sure her presence remained visually overwhelming, a looming figure of supposed order. Her voice dropped slightly, shifting into a mockingly sympathetic tone. "This doesn't have to get ugly. Just leave. We can avoid further action. You clearly weren't informed about the updated HOA protocols. Ignorance is common when people don't attend community meetings." Her hand waved toward the property, as though sweeping it away. "These structures are out of alignment with our aesthetic standards. The barn isn't on the approved color list. The fencing violates perimeter regulations. Your porch lights are too bright. The mailbox doesn't meet size requirements." Each new accusation came with growing self-satisfaction. The details were arbitrary, but they sounded official. Her clipboard had become a prop in a personal performance, not a document of real authority. With the phone still nearby, she glanced at it again and muttered under her breath, "They should be here soon." There was no fear, only anticipation. The police would arrive, and she expected them to thank her for her civic duty. She pictured herself standing proudly as officers removed the violator, her hands crossed, clipboard in arm, sunglasses glinting in the sun like a sheriff in a suburban standoff. The silence she received in return continued to unnerve her, but she misread it. She interpreted it as fear, hesitation, guilt. What it really was, she didn't even consider. She pressed again. "You're not going to win this. This is a lawful community. We follow standards here. No exceptions, no grandfather clauses, no loopholes." The words came with finality, spoken by someone who had never had her authority tested. Her voice, once shrill, was now steel-wrapped in smugness. Her fingers wrapped tightly around the edge of the clipboard, knuckles pale, grip unrelenting. 30 minutes. She said it again, quieter this time, like a spell she believed would work if repeated. Her body relaxed slightly, believing the situation was under control. The phone buzzed once with a message she didn't read, and she nodded to herself. Her own expectations framed the moment. The ranch would be cleared, the resident humbled, the HOA victorious. The wind tugged lightly at her clothes, but even nature felt secondary to the countdown she believed she had initiated. Her inner clock ticked closer to satisfaction, unaware that the person she had challenged didn't operate under her rules. 30 minutes. Her window of imagined power. A deadline set not for justice, but for humiliation. She waited, unaware that what was coming wasn't surrender, but something else entirely. The sound of approaching sirens reached the edge of the neighborhood like a warning bell before a storm. Her posture straightened instantly. The grin she had held back now crept across her face, slow and self-satisfied. Her eyes flicked toward her clipboard, then the house, then the street. Everything had played out exactly as planned in her mind. Authority summoned. Order restored. Her complaint, she believed, had successfully triggered the weight of the law. The first police cruiser rounded the corner, followed by a second, both vehicles moving slowly as if assessing the situation before stepping into it. The lights flashed, but the sirens died down. She took it as a sign of escalation under control. A minor incident. Just enough presence to make her look justified, not overreacting. Her back straightened further, her lips tightening in anticipation of what she assumed would be immediate backup. As the doors opened, her hand shot up in a sharp, purposeful wave. The clipboard raised high like a signal flag, an invitation for immediate engagement. The gesture screamed self-importance. She was already speaking before the officers had fully exited their vehicles. "Thank you for coming." "He's still here," she declared, her voice now clear, loud, and edged with false relief. "I told him he had 30 minutes to vacate. He refused. He's been non-compliant since I issued the HOA warning." The first officer's eyes shifted past her, scanning the area, expression unreadable. His partner stepped forward but didn't speak. Their movements were professional, measured, not rushed, not concerned. She continued talking anyway, gesturing broadly toward the house. "I explained the violations. He's refusing to leave. That's why I had no choice but to call you. This is private community property. He's in breach of the HOA's legal framework." The officers said nothing at first. Then, one of them locked eyes on the man she had spent the past hour trying to remove. His expression changed subtly. Recognition, not surprise. The pause that followed wasn't confusion. It was respect. The clipboard in her hand suddenly felt less significant. The first officer stepped forward, voice low and direct. "Good afternoon, sir." There was no question in his tone, no hesitation, not a trace of suspicion, only respect. Then a small but significant gesture followed, a nod, followed by a formal, "Sir," and then, most unexpectedly, a crisp salute. Her eyes widened slightly. The hand holding the clipboard lowered just an inch. Her breath caught in her throat, but she masked it with a shallow cough. The second officer offered a handshake, followed by, "Didn't know you were stationed out here. Thought you were still upstate leading tactical certification." The calm and casual familiarity between them struck with more force than any legal threat could. She blinked, once, twice, trying to reorient herself. Her words stumbled out. This time quieter, unsure, Wait, do you know him? Both officers turned to her now. The first one nodded. Know him? He trained half of our unit in urban response and threat containment. This man runs the tactical certification program for the state. He's one of our top instructors. The words hit like bricks falling in slow motion. Her lips parted slightly, struggling to connect her assumptions with the reality she had just been handed. Her voice lacked its former power. But he doesn't have jurisdiction here. The HOA, the officer cut in, tone firm but respectful. With all due respect, ma'am, the HOA doesn't override property law or municipal code, and you just called law enforcement on the person who teaches law enforcement how to respond in high-stakes situations. She swallowed hard. The clipboard lowered further. Her mouth opened again, but no words came. The weight of what she had done settled over her like a suffocating fog. The second officer turned slightly toward her. Do you have any formal complaint filed? A legal violation? Or was this an HOA concern you escalated on your own? The silence stretched too long before her answer came. I was just enforcing the regulations. He wasn't cooperating. The first officer's brow furrowed. Ma'am, the property he's on is legally outside the HOA's governance zone. It's privately owned, grandfathered out of the association's charter. You had no standing to demand anything, let alone issue a removal threat. Her shoulders visibly dropped. The hand clutching the clipboard now trembled slightly, the once powerful posture unraveling with every word from the officers. She tried one last defense. But we received complaints. The barn, the fence, the lights. The second officer sighed. Cosmetic concerns aren't criminal violations, and even if they were, enforcement would come through code compliance, not a citizen demand backed by zero authority. You misused emergency services to enforce imaginary rules. The first officer turned back to the man at the center of it all. Apologies for the disturbance, sir. We'll make a note of this. If there's anything you need, let us know. As the officers returned to their vehicles, her silence continued. The clipboard now hung limply at her side. The illusion of control had shattered in real time. The badge of faux authority had become nothing more than a stack of irrelevant paper. The sirens no longer sounded. The lights faded in the distance. What remained wasn't order restored, it was ego exposed. The clipboard, once held like a badge of power, now trembled in her grasp. The silence following the officer's departure pressed in around her like a judgment louder than words. The cracks in her confidence widened by the second. Her feet shifted, as if searching for solid ground, but no argument, no regulation, no citation could support her anymore. Her gaze darted toward the nearest houses, hoping someone would appear in support. Someone who shared her complaints, or at least her dislike of the ranch. But the windows stayed shut, the porches empty. The neighbors she once believed were silently cheering her on had vanished into the background. She was alone in the confrontation she had orchestrated. Her voice returned, but softer now, strained and uneasy. There's still a process. You can't just ignore the rules. The board will hear about this. The sentence came out with far less conviction than she intended. The name-dropping sounded hollow, a last attempt to resurrect an image of control that no longer existed. The response was measured, calm, and deliberate. I've already met with the county zoning board and had my property exempted from HOA review 3 years ago. It's recorded and certified. You can verify it with the planning office. The explanation should have been unnecessary, but it served as a final nail in the coffin of her argument. Her eyes fell to the clipboard again, searching for any line or clause that might still carry weight. Nothing she held could override the legal reality she had just been handed. Her authority wasn't just irrelevant, it had never existed in the first place. Her next words were defensive, desperate, tinged with panic beneath the surface. We have standards for a reason. This isn't personal. The HOA was formed to protect property value. You're setting a dangerous precedent. Her attempt to shift the narrative from personal grudge to communal concern was transparent. The polished veneer of righteousness cracked further. The reply came without hesitation. What's dangerous is someone attempting to remove a lawful resident from their own property under false pretenses. That's not community enforcement. That's harassment. The word hit like a slap. She blinked rapidly, mouth open but unable to form a counter. The term stuck in her throat. Harassment. The accusations she threw so casually now pointed directly back at her, loaded with real legal weight. She drew a shaky breath. I was just doing my duty. People don't always understand how the HOA works. Sometimes we have to enforce boundaries. Another calm reply followed. Boundaries work both ways. You crossed one today. Her face flushed with heat she couldn't conceal. The clipboard finally dropped to her side, no longer a tool of intimidation. It had become a symbol of her overreach, her misjudgment, her failure to recognize the limits of her role. Murmurs spread quietly through the few neighbors who had begun to peek from behind curtains and cracked doors. No one offered support. No one walked over. The crowd she once imagined cheering for her had witnessed her unravel in silence. Every second of defiance, every smug command, every false claim, all of it had collapsed before their eyes. Her final excuse fell flat. There was confusion. That's all this was. Miscommunication. The statement failed to convince even herself. It was an attempt to escape accountability, a soft rewrite of the last hour. The silence in response was louder. Then objection. Her misunderstanding had evolved into something else entirely, a public humiliation delivered by the very system she thought would validate her actions. From the other side of the property line came a sentence she hadn't expected. You have two options. You can walk away now and pretend this never happened, or we can go the legal route and file a formal complaint for abuse of authority, misuse of emergency services, and attempted unlawful eviction. No anger colored the statement, only cold, undeniable truth. Her head lowered slightly. The fight had gone out of her. There was no script for what came next, no pre-typed notice, no HOA manual to fall back on. I didn't mean for it to get this far, she said quietly. Her tone had changed completely. No condescension, no assertiveness, only uncertainty and regret. Another response followed. It got this far because you assumed no one would push back. Her fingers fumbled with the edge of the clipboard, flipping it closed with mechanical precision. The smooth plastic snapped shut with finality. No more citations, no more threats, just silence and consequence. She turned without speaking again, each step slower than the last. Her shoulders no longer squared, her pace no longer purposeful. The walk of someone retreating, not leaving. Each movement betrayed the truth she would try to deny later. That control had never truly belonged to her. The clipboard, once wielded like a weapon, now hung like a burden she could no longer justify. Carrying. The HOA meeting that followed was scheduled with little notice but high anticipation. The agenda, normally dry and routine, carried an unexpected weight. Rumors had spread, complaints had been filed. The incident involving the unauthorized citation, attempt, misuse of emergency services, and false claims of authority had become impossible to ignore. No amount of political maneuvering could shield her from the consequences this time. The board, usually composed of indifferent neighbors' content, with quiet proceedings, faced pressure from within and outside the community. Questions poured in about boundaries, abuse of position, and the unchecked behavior of self-appointed enforcers. Emails had been sent, video clips circulated. Her image, once one of confident authority, now came attached to accusations and formal warnings. She entered the meeting with rehearsed lines and selective explanations. She blamed miscommunication, referenced long-standing concerns, and suggested her actions were misinterpreted. She leaned heavily on her intentions, hoping they would override the clear facts now on public record. Her voice wavered only slightly as she read from a prepared statement, carefully avoiding the parts she couldn't explain away. The board members listened, but not with the blind allegiance she had once enjoyed. Eyes glanced down at the complaint, folder in front of them. The folder was thick, too thick to dismiss. Witnesses had submitted statements. Officers had filed a report. One officer had even offered to testify, not out of spite, but out of concern for how quickly a personal vendetta had nearly escalated into a legal matter. The board president, a usually passive figure, addressed the issue directly. The tone was clear and procedural. We cannot allow HOA positions to be used for personal agendas. This was not a mistake. It was a deliberate overstep. No one on the board spoke in her defense. The vote was swift. Removal from her role as community liaison. A 1-year suspension from participating in any HOA committee activity. A formal letter of reprimand filed into community records. The ruling was final. Her response came through gritted teeth and tightly held composure. She didn't shout. She didn't protest. But the silence that followed her exit said more than any words could. The grip she held over the neighborhood had slipped completely. Not just authority lost, credibility erased. The incident had wider effects. The HOA revised its enforcement guidelines, tightening rules around who could issue warnings, under what conditions, and with what oversight. Emergency services contact protocols were rewritten to prevent misuse. Residents were required to complete conflict resolution workshops before applying for HOA leadership positions. The man at the center of it all, calm, private, unimpressed by the chaos, never issued a personal retaliation. He didn't need to. His record, reputation, and restraint did the work for him. Quietly, he became a respected figure in the area, not by campaign or speech, but through example. When asked about the incident, he gave short, respectful answers. Handled, resolved, no hard feelings. But the lesson lingered for everyone. Neighbors became more cautious of HOA overreach. More residents began attending meetings. They asked questions. They reviewed the charter. They pushed back when rules were twisted for convenience. A sense of balance returned, one that hadn't existed in years. Power was no longer assumed. It was scrutinized. As for her, the aftermath followed. Her like a shadow. She avoided eye contact in public spaces. Her voice lost the sharpness it once carried. The neighbors she once barked orders at now offered only nods of acknowledgement, nothing more. No greetings, no small talk, just space. The clipboard was gone, replaced by silence. Her name, once floated with pride during community introductions, now evoked discomfort. She spoke less. She showed up rarely. When she did, it was with eyes that searched for judgment and lips pressed into silence. The final blow came quietly. The police department she had once tried to weaponize issued her a formal notice. Not a criminal charge, but a citation for misuse of public resources and obstruction of duty. A fine followed. The amount wasn't devastating, but the meaning was. Her name now appeared in county records under an administrative reprimand. A permanent mark that even HOA status couldn't erase. That record became the line she couldn't cross back over. There would be no second chance. No redemption arc through another committee position. No quiet return to authority. Her story in the community had shifted, no longer the enforcer of standards, but the cautionary tale told when power is misused and underestimated. And the man she tried to evict? He continued living quietly, improving his property, greeting neighbors, minding his business. Occasionally, patrol cars drove by, offering nothing but a respectful wave. Their presence was not one of surveillance, but of acknowledgement. He was not the outsider she assumed. He was, in many ways, the standard. The neighborhood moved on, wiser now, and the clipboard never returned. Subscribe to Expose HOA Karen for more jaw-dropping HOA justice stories that prove karma always knocks loudest.